Hi everyone, my name is Elijah Flores Sandoval, and I'm currently playing Seymour Krellborn in Little Shop of Horrors at Red Rocks Community College. And today I just want to talk to you about the actor's process. While talking with friends that have never done theater, have never been in a show in any aspect, they have this misconception that all that acting is memorizing your lines and having the director tell you where to stand, where to move. And while that is a small part of it, there's a huge other part of it of discovering your character and like why do they react the way they do? Why do they talk to people the way they do? Why do they do certain things in the script? And what is the physicality that they bring to that? And a lot of that comes from the pre-show work that happens before the initial read through. And today I'm gonna break down my steps and how I do that. And I'm gonna show you using my character journal that I put together specifically for Seymour. So my first step in the process is just read the script. I read it 4 different times before I even start thinking about memorizing or anything like that. Just because each read through gives you different information. So my first read through, I just read it straight through. I want to get as much information as possible. I want to know what the layout of the show is, what the structure is, what's going to be happening in the show, and it's just reading it top to bottom. During the second read through, I specifically look for what does my character say about themselves, either out loud or subconsciously. What do they think about themselves? On the third read through, I go through and I pay attention to what everybody else in the show says about my character. What do they think about the character? How do they react to the character, and why do they say things to the character? And then on my fourth read through, it's now implementing. Now I know what I think of myself. Now I know what others think of myself. And that's when the real thought process of like, oh, well, in this moment, this is why I say something like this, you know? So going off of my read-throughs, like I have my journal separated into different sections. So here I have everything that's marked in my green ink. It's just a layout of the character. This first section over here is, about the character, age range, just the general kind of consensus of the character description that comes with the script. I write that down right here to keep that in mind. And then underneath here, I have all this right here is just things that Seymour says about himself. For example, he says in the first number that he's a slob, that he's poor. At one moment, he tells Audrey that he's lucky to have been taken in by Mushnick. So these are all things that Seymour says. Going on a little bit, I have it listed out by character here on what they say about Seymour and what they think about him. So, for example, like Mushnick sees Seymour as annoying and frustrating and a misfit employee, whereas like Audrey, she has this similar kind of yearning for Seymour that she doesn't like really give into until later on in the show. Whereas like Audrey too, the plant, they convince Seymour that he has nothing until he's met the plant. So the plant's the one that's going to give him everything that he wants, everything that he needs. I'm like I said, on this section here, I'm just listing out what other characters are saying about Seymour. If we go on, I have 2 full pages for each character, detailing the relationship and the dynamics between each character, just so that there's a deeper understanding of why they interact the way that they do, how are they feeling while they're interacting. One of the characters that was a little bit more difficult to interact with was Audrey, simply because like Seymour obviously has a lot of feelings for Audrey, but he's very timid, he's very shy, and he doesn't know if Audrey's going to reciprocate those same feelings. So he's also scared to admit who he is or who he is and like what he loves about Audrey. And so like I have detailed the relationship lines between that. And I like I said, I did it for each character. So this one is for Audrey. If we move forward, I have one for Audrey too. Going forward, this one is for Oren the dentist, their relationship. This one's a little bit shorter simply because they don't have, as much stage time together. They don't interact as much as other people in the show do. And then after that, we go into a full-out character list, character map. So I have myself, Seymour Krelber, in the middle, and then I have the different characters around, with arrows pointing to how they interact with each other, how they, what relationships they have with one another. And then in the purple ink, I have, specific details as to why they're connected. So, for example, like everybody that gets eaten by Audrey 2, they have some sort of connection. And from Audrey 2 to that character, I have it written as food for every single character, with the exception of Seymour. Because not only does Audrey 2 see Seymour as a source of food, but it also sees Seymour as a puppet that he can control. Seymour being very naive and very, very coy and very shy, he's taken into the arms of the plant, and he's being controlled during most of the show. And this, we see the give and pull between the plant and Seymour, in terms of like how Seymour's like, okay, well, you're gonna give me everything I want, everything I need, and then later on in the show, Seymour's like, oh well, is the price I'm paying really worth what I'm getting? And then we see that internal conflict that happens with Seymour. Now, I do a character journal for every show that I'm in. So each character journal that I've done before is a little bit different from this one now, just character by character. Specifically for this show, because Seymour is a botanist. He's very into plants. In the show he says, strange plants are my hobby. I decided that, for my journal, I would have kind of like a field research portion, specifically relating to the pod. So here I have, the information side where I was like, it's an unknown plant, but then Seymour decides to name it an Audrey 2, so he has it named as Audrey 2, the species, the height, and any key features, and then food. And so like here on this section, I have things that I had tried and failed, and then, Audrey 2 eats blood, so it worked. And then on the other side, I have an illustration of the pod, and then underneath it's just a little notes section on so for this one I said, I have tried southern exposure, pinching varied levels of moisture from desert to mud, and nothing seems to work. It responded and opened when I pricked my finger, and I gave it a few drops of blood. We'll update with new findings. So it's just like a running kind of section. After that, after that first one, I jumped straight into some journal entries. And these journal entries, I'm just going, I laid these out in a way where I can reference my script for a specific point in time, and then I go into the journal and I write a journal entry, but either before that moment in time or between important moments. So for this very first entry, I'm talking about how Mr. Mushnick allows me every other Sunday off, and so I'm going to go and use today, and I'm going to go into the wholesale flower district. And so this entire journal entry is detailing Seymour's day at the day of him finding the Audrey 2 pod, and it talks about how he goes to the wholesale flower district. He talks to the old Chinese man. The old Chinese man sells it to him, and he sells it to him at a clearance price because the pod is already wilting. And then Seymour taking it home and thinking, oh, well, I know I can try all these different things. I can look at my books to see if I can find what kind of species this is. And he's really, really excited. As we go on, this section, right after that, we have gotten to the point in the show where Seymour sings "Grow for Me" to the plant and gives him the first few drops of blood. And after that, the pod does grow. And so I did go in and I have an updated sheet, Audrey 2, species, height, and notes. And then I have an updated drawing of the pod as it has grown, seeing that progression. And then another part, after that, right back into journal entries. But another aspect that I thought of, while diving into Seymour and like who he is, he's always loved Audrey. And so with him being as timid and shy as he is, he's always been scared to, tell his feelings to Audrey. And so another section that I did is I have love letters that Seymour has written to Audrey that he has never had the guts to send to her. And some of them are just like, oh, I'm confessing my feelings to you. One of these, it's a letter where I'm talking about how, I can't find the plant in any of my books. I don't know its name or species, so I'm going to give it a name of my own. And the way that Seymour decides to name the pod Audrey 2 is he comes to a conclusion that, oh, I'm going to go to bed now. And if I dream of Audrey tonight, then tomorrow I'll name the pod Audrey 2. And that night, in one of these letters to Audrey, I'm detailing, I had a dream of you last night. And in this dream, we were in this little development that where all the houses and yards were the same. We had, we had a 12-inch screen where we watched Lucy. We had a 9:15 bedtime. And all of these things are pulled from the lyrics of "Somewhere That's Green," which is sung by the character of Audrey, which is giving a parallel between the characters of like Seymour's also dreaming of this life, this home with Audrey, and he has it detailed in a letter, but he never sends it, and so they don't realize that they're dreaming of the same thing until it's way later in the show. Moving on, I go into right after "Grow for Me," in that moment, Seymour pricks his finger on a rose, and that's that's what prompts the pod to open up for the first time. And so for this journal entry, it's right after everything has happened, and as you can see, I have like little red marks where I took a red pen and smudged it on my finger and just smudged it onto the page to show, hey, like my finger's bleeding, but I have to get this information down, Going a little bit forward, we have our next progression of the pod, which is pod 3. At this point, this is the first pod that talks to Seymour, and it's extraordinary and it's exciting for Seymour, but at the same time, it's like, oh, my plant is talking to me. Am I going crazy? And like for this one of the changes is like under the species, I said it's still unknown, but it still could be part of the Venus flytrap genome, but it talks, so unsure. And then under keynotes and features, Audrey 2 can talk now and move around on its own. Since feeding it Orin, it's grown exponentially and now emits a sweet and alluring scent. I'm hoping that it doesn't need to be fed again anytime soon. We'll update if there are any notable changes. At this point, Seymour has... Well, he hasn't really killed Orin, but he was instrumental in the death of Orin, which creates this entire underlying structure of Seymour being happy that Orin's out of the picture, and now all these great opportunities are coming to fruition. All these things are happening that the plant has promised him, but in order to get them, he had to feed another person to the plant, and so now Seymour's having this entire different dialogue underneath where he's like, well, what I'm doing isn't okay. But if I don't do this, then the plant's going to die and all this is going to go away. And like we see that later on in the show during the number of Michelle and Harriet, Seymour sings about how, oh, the vegetable must be destroyed. You know, if I sign these contracts, that means more killing. I don't know what to do. And then there's a shift in the music, and Seymour sings about Audrey, and in those lyrics, he's saying, without my plant, she might not love me anymore. She might not love me anymore, which leads him into, you know, signing the contracts, you know, because he believes that without Audrey too, he believes he's nothing again, a nobody. That nobody would want to be with him, nobody would want to love him, especially because if we look at the relationship between Mushnik and Seymour at the beginning of the show, Seymour, I mean, he's grateful to Mushnik, but he's obviously a very harsh character in the way that he talks to Seymour and the way that he treats Seymour, and that doesn't shift until we see a sudden influx of cash coming to the flower shop after Audrey 2's appearance and growth. And so we see a change, and that happens when Mushnik offers to adopt Seymour and make him, you know, his son. And so Seymour's thinking, like, I need to get rid of this plant, but if I get rid of this plant, you know, I'm going to be a nothing again. You know, Audrey's not going to love me. Mushnik isn't going to love me. You know, I've done all these terrible, terrible things, but he's justified them by thinking, oh, well, the plant's, if I'm feeding the plant is giving me these opportunities in return. And this, you know, I continued on, and we have some more journal entries that continue on. And then I have it stopped halfway through a journal entry, because by this point we have reached end of the show, where Seymour confronts the plant. And so there's no time to update the journal before the ending happens. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen or doesn't know the show. But yeah, so it's unfinished, and that's a deliberate choice, just because of where it lands in the timeline of the story. But this journal, this really, really helped me figure out who Seymour is, figure out Seymour's voice, figure out their mannerisms, you know, like how they would talk, you know, like I, as Elijah, speak one way, whereas Seymour, he's more like timid, and he stumbles on his words a little bit, and he makes sure that what he's saying comes across clearly, but at the same time he's not really sure if you want to hear what he's saying, you know, and it really helps me lock into the character. It really helps me feel who Seymour is on a more personal level rather than just face value what's written in the script. And that's all due to the pre-work. You know, I am very, very thankful to all the work that, you know, Ben Stasny, the director of the show, put into the rehearsal process in terms of helping us as actors really discover the characters and like different mannerisms, different quirks, and really playing up the campy aspect of the show. But I had a very strong baseline going into the process that we could build upon, because I did this journal, because I did the pre-work, I did the homework that comes with playing another person honestly on stage. And that's exactly what acting is, you know? You go on stage to play imaginary circumstances as if they were real. And because of that, we have a show, you know? I've talked to other cast members, and they all have similar journals, maybe not, you know, as illustrated or as detailed or whatever, but they have similar journals specifically for their character. You know, Bennett Archer, he has one for Mushnik, and Kate Stachowski, she has one for Audrey, you know, and it's very fun to see our individual thoughts especially as a cast, like we like to get together and we'll share our journals, share what our initial thoughts are, and like that creates a space where it's like, oh, I didn't think of it in that way. I didn't think that our characters would have this kind of relationship. Why do you think that our characters act this way together? It's a really, really fun part of the process that allows us to delve really, really deep into these characters and really make them more human instead of just these people that are playing these circumstances on stage. But yeah, I mean, that's the deep dive into the actors process. I'm really, really excited about this show. We open on the 16th. We run the 16th, 17th, 18th, the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. I'm really, really excited to see you guys there. If you're a student, make sure that you get a ticket. All students get free tickets by using the promo code RRCC student. And yeah, this process has been such an amazing experience. I'm so happy to finally get a chance to share these characters with an audience. And honestly, I just can't wait to see y'all at Skid Row. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this deep dive. Have a good one.